All right, let's get underway having a look at the 4 layers of situational awareness. We're going to take a quick look at each one, give you some of the main headlines about them, and then we'll jump in and show you some actual tips and tricks in space how to use them. They are going to go from largest down to smallest, and the first one is your local chat window. This is some system-wide information about the pilots who are in the system with you. It shows their name, and you can click on their name and get some extra information about the pilot. So if they're in your system, they'll show up here. It doesn't matter if they are cloaked up. Sitting in a cloaked up ship, their name will still show in local chat. Now beware, this doesn't work the same in wormholes. So if you're in wormholes, local chat will not show you who is in the system unless they speak, but that's another video for another time. Alright, so that covers the whole system. Anywhere in the whole system, you've got this information, no matter how far away they are from you. The next one is what we call your D-scan, or your directional scanner. It pings out a sphere of up to 14.3 AU, okay, and it shows you everything that it finds within that sphere, starting from your position as the center of that sphere. It's kind of like if you imagine a submarine sonar. It just sends out a ping, and everything it finds, it comes back and gives you some information about it. It does not show cloaked ships. So if there's a cloaked ship sitting right beside you or somewhere within that sphere, it will not show up on D-scan. It doesn't have to be a 14.3 AU sphere. You can adjust the range of that sphere. You can also change it, narrow it down to a tight beam of up to 5 degrees. So it could be like a cone that you're just pinging out, just saying, just show me what's in this little cone. So we'll take a look at that shortly. You can filter out things that you don't want to see. You might only be interested in seeing ships that are within that D-scan range, so you can set filters to just give you the information that you're looking for. And importantly, it does not show you the name of the pilot. It'll only show you the ship name. And of course, that's completely arbitrary. People can name their ships whatever they'd like. So be aware, the information you get back in there will show you the type of ship, but not who is flying it. The next thing is the grid and your overview that you will have been using right back from the tutorial. The overview will show you everything that is on grid with you. By grid, we're talking about an 8,000 kilometer sphere that is around your location. So if something is within 8,000 kilometers of you, it will show up on the overview. And once again, it does not show a cloaked ship. So if something's cloaked right beside you, you won't know. It will not show on the grid or the D-scan, on the overview rather. However, different to D-scan, it will show you the actual name of the pilot as well as other information. So it differs from the D-scan in that regard. You can configure it in many ways. Now listen, overview is probably an hour's long video just on its own. So we'll do some more on that later, but just be aware of the basics for now. And the grid or the overview shows you items that you can then actually use your radial menu to warp to them. But be aware, you cannot warp to ships. You can only warp to things like stations and anything else that's kind of on there that's not ships. Provided it's more than 150 kilometers away, you can usually use your overview to warp to it. Finally, so we've gone from local chat, the whole system, down to a 14.3 AU D-scan, down to an 8,000 kilometer grid, and then finally is your tactical overlay. Now your tactical overlay is a 200 kilometer two-dimensional ring that shows around your ship, and this gives you a real visual representation of your immediate vicinity and what's going on. Now because of that, it really provides a good tool for visual cues for your movement, for you to decide which direction to move your ship and how to move it. It you can put ship in and pilot information on to the tactical overlay via what we call brackets, and it also helps you just visualize the 3D space around you. Because you're using this often for your decisions on movement, it really gives you a good sense of awareness of what direction things are coming from, where they are in relation to you, and which way to move accordingly. And here is the big one. The tactical overlay means imminent danger. So this is effectively the only place you can be killed. If something is within the range of your tactical overlay, you're in imminent danger of being killed or doing the killing if you're in an offensive frame of mind. Everything else tells you where things are around you, but not necessarily you can't be killed from that point. But once something is inside that 200-kilometer ring, potentially you're looking at imminent danger. Alright, so that's the quick summary of your 4 layers of situational awareness. Let's get out in space and have a play with a few of them and see how they work. Alright, so here we are sitting out in space. We're in HiSec. We're in the system of Dodixie, which is one of the major trade hubs. We'll spend some time here just going through these tools in relative safety before the next episode, where we're going to actually show you how to put them to use to stay safe in low sec. So your local channel, if for some reason you've not got a local channel or you've managed to close it and you can't find it, in your Neocom, this little icon here will open up your chat channels, and one of them will be local. Should always be an option for you to open up your local chat. You can have other chat boxes open. You'll see they're basically just tabbed. Here's my corp chat channel, my local chat channel, and there are hundreds of in-game channels which you can actually access. We'll look at that in a future episode. For today, let's focus on local. So you'll see a couple of things here. Looking at this, it's got a bracket and then a number 227. Also, that number is repeated here in the top right corner of the box. It shows me that that's the number of pilots in the system at the moment. In alphabetical order, I can scroll through and see the names of every pilot that's in this system. If I'd like to know some more information about that pilot, I can double click on their name here and I go into their character information window. I can look at things like their bio, which is a text box you can sort of customize yourself, any standings I have set towards them, etc. Employment history, this is a fairly useful one because you can look at this and it will show you what corps they've been in, the history of the character. So I can see this character is only 3 days old. Obviously, if you're looking and you see a character that's sort of, quite old, or looks quite experienced, then you may want to think, potentially this person could be more dangerous. Although with the introduction of skill injectors, there's nothing to say that this 3-day-old character hasn't injected heaps of skills and is now quite a capable adversary if I was to choose to fight them. You can make notes. You can make your own text notes, right? So if you have an interaction with a pilot or someone that you're constantly coming across, you can make your own notes about them. You can add them to contacts, but we'll look at all that in another episode. For now, you can use your local chat just to find some information about who is in system with you. Now, a couple of things about local that I would like you to do straight away. If you have it in a UI window with any other tabs, I'd like you to drag it out and keep it separate. Okay, we're going to shrink this one down. It's a really, really good idea to always have your local as a separate window so that information is always available to you as pilots come in and out of system. Particularly if you're on your own or in a very quiet low-sec system, you want to know when someone has come in. Now, if you don't have that window open, if for some reason you're on your Corp tab, you may miss very important intel that tells you, hey, someone or a whole bunch of people have suddenly turned up in local. This is also quite messy. So we're going to make the information much neater and much more succinct. So we're going to get rid of all these portraits. So the first thing we'll do is go to the gear icon and we're going to show text only. So the actual conversations, the actual chat texts themselves, you'll see now the portraits have been removed. Let's do the same with the list of pilots on the little sort of icon here with like the people heads. We're going to show compact member list because this is all I really need. I really want to just quickly and easily see a list of who's in local, and I can see the chat here. Now it's much more compact. I've got a lot more information in a smaller space. And finally, one other thing you can do with local that we'll look at probably in the next video is Once you know the name of a pilot, if you'd like to know more information about them, you can use some third-party websites to quickly get information about a pilot and their kills. You can use things like the Z Kill Board, where you can look up and see how active they've been, what kind of PvP they've been doing, what kind of ships they like to fly. So all that information coming from the pilot's name is really handy. You'll also see this little flashing symbol here. When we go through in a future video and set up our overview, you'll see information like this will come up. So if I hover over this, I can see this pilot is a criminal. So there's a little alert there. This one means that they're in our corporation. So you can actually set it up to have little bits of information show up on the chat box itself. Alright, that's probably it for local chat. Really important to have it on its own. Tidy it up because it's some really handy information that tells you who is in system with you. Okay, moving on from local chat, we're going to go to our next level down, which was our directional scanner. So, hovering over this little, pressing this little icon down here, you'll see I've got this radial wheel. Okay, there are two types of scanners. To the left is your probe scanner, which we'll look at in a future video, but we want to open our directional scanner. Okay, it's also got a shortcut Alt-D, but once you open it, it should really stay open anyway. When you first open it, you'll get this big sort of weird looking map thing. We'll come back to use the map part of it, but for the moment I just want you to actually press this little box to detach the information part of it from the map part of it. Close the map, we'll come back to that in a moment. This box here, this is the critical one that you're going to use just only all the time. Really, if you're anywhere in space, this should be open and you should be using it. So for the moment, I usually tuck mine up in the right corner, but for now I'll make it a bit bigger and bring it down here just so we can see what is on it. So let's do a very quick tour of our D scanner. You'll see we have columns, name, type, and distance. So this is the name of the ship, and you'll see you can sort each of these columns by clicking on the column from A to Z or Z to A. Usually you'll have it sorted from distance. The name, importantly, this list is the name of the ship. So if I go down to some ships down here, let's go with something like this. Sith's Tristan. This is not the pilot's name. It is the name they have given their ship. Type is what it is. So in this case, I can see it's a Tristan. I can see some other things on here, a catalyst, a mobile depot, etc., etc. I can see these items actually have a distance value. That's because they are on grid with us. Ships, that is. So these are kind of items. Some other items that show up here are all within 14.3 AU. Things like stations and that, it will show you a distance. But all these other things up here, if we have a look, don't have a distance. They're not on grid. They're not within 8,000 kilometers, but they were inside our D-scan bubble. Speaking of the bubble, remember we said we could adjust the range, so it's currently set at 14.3 AU. If you'd like, you can click this button and work in kilometers instead, but most people work with AU. You can slide to these hard stops, so go to 1, 5, 10, 14.3, but if you'd like to make finer adjustments, you can up and down to adjust that. And I find, in fact, when you're doing this in a hurry, you can also use your mouse scroll wheel. If you've selected this, you can mouse scroll wheel up and down. So that will change the size of your bubble, and you can change the angle. So at the moment it's the 360 sphere. I can drop that down to 180, etc., etc., all the way down to 5 degrees, and visually we'll look at that in a moment. You activate your D-scan by pressing the scan button, but you kind of don't. You will tend most of the time to use a hotkey. Now, traditionally, or by default, it is set as V. So every time I press V, you will see the little ping goes out, that it lights up, you get a little ping sound, press V again. And when you're sitting in a hostile space and you're really wanting to know what's going on around you, or you're keeping an eye out in the immediate space around you, you may be hitting that every few seconds. So I am going to get you, or strongly suggest, you change your hotkey to something else. Rather than V key, we are going to change it to the space bar because it's big, it's easy to find, we don't even have to think about where it is, because you are going to literally hit this millions of times if you play this game for any extended period. Here's how we change that. We hit the escape key and our settings will come up. We're going to go to shortcuts And I'm simply going to type into the filter direct, something like that. Here we go. And there it is, directional scan. I want to change the shortcut from V to spacebar. So if I double click on that, it says press a new, so just simply press the spacebar. It will say, well, the spacebar is already set to something else. We don't need it to a shortcut for this, so I'm going to reassign it. And now when I do my search for directional scanner, you'll see the shortcut is space. Let's return to the game, and now when I hit the spacebar, you'll see it fires off my D-scan. A very strong suggestion that you change it to the spacebar, because you want to be able to hit this thing even without thinking, and certainly without having to look where is the key that I'm looking for. Let's take a visual look at what the D-scan actually looks like. We're going to go up here and turn on this solar system map. Now this was the part we detached earlier, because you always want your information window open. You don't always need this, but there is a correlation between the two. At the moment, my D-scan is not showing on here. If for some reason it's not, then this little icon here will toggle on and off the scan cone, okay, and give you a visual representation of the extent or the range of your D-scan. So I can turn that on and off if you find this is getting in the way. So here it is. This is my 14.3 AU sphere of directional scanning. So you'll see that my solar system is actually larger than this. Like it covers this whole area here. These little concentric circles are showing AU, 15, 20, 25, etc. So you'll see that my 14.3 sits about here, just before the 15 mark. Now, if I change my slider, you'll see that change down to a 10 AU sphere, 5 AU, and you'll notice every time I change that, it actually fires off the D-scan. So if I bring it down to a 1 AU, you'll see it fires off the D-scan, and I can see that I'm using a 1 AU sphere or bubble that is only showing me information for items that are sitting within that sphere. Let's make it slightly larger. Let's work with 5 for the moment. Not only can I change the size of the sphere, but I can change the angle. It's currently set at 360. Let's change it now, and I've got a 180 degree cone. So this is me, right? If I hover over here, it says you are here. I'm scanning just within this hemisphere that it's pointing towards, okay? And let's change it now down to a 90 degree cone. Let's see if we can visualize that a little better from this angle, maybe a 90 degree cone, and I'm just changing the cone, narrowing it down all the way down to a 5 degree cone. And why would we do this? We'll look at in a future video why you would do this, but you may want to very specifically scan a certain part in space. In fact, let's do it now. Let's say I wanted to D-scan. Let's get it out. We'll leave it at a 5 degree cone, and we'll bring it out to 14.3. We're not in a good spot here, so I'm going to move somewhere else where we can see some stuff. Let's warp over to here. In fact, let's leave this video running. You'll see as we move that this solar system map actually will also give you a visual representation of us moving. So you'll see if we were here, we're now warping to this station, and you can see that my everything moved with me as I went. Alright, so here we are now. We're just sitting off this station that we warped to. Let's say I just wanted to D-scan this planet here, Dodixie 7. It's 3.48 AU away. As I hover over it on the solar system map, I get that information. If I wanted to just D-scan to see if there was anything happening at that location, I can change my angle down to 5 degrees. I'm going to change my range down to 5 because I only want to cover out as far as 3.48. And I'm going to, there's a couple of ways you can do this. I can actually, on my solar system map, I can use my radial menu. And at the bottom I have an option to D-scan. You'll see the cone flipped around, and now I'm just D-scanning within that cone. So if a ship appeared at this planet, it would show up on my D-scan, depending on how I've got it configured. We'll talk about that shortly. But you can see it's a really handy tool, using it in conjunction with the map, which I can pan around using my right key. I could just now say, well, what about at Dodixie 5, right? What about at this Serpentis hideaway? I'm going to D-scan out to that. And in fact, you'll see up here and now in my directional scanner, over here at this Serpentis hideaway, there are 2 ships, a Magnate and a Vexor. And I believe that they're there because I've descanned that position from my solar system map. The magnate's now disappeared. Can you see how the situational awareness is developing now? I know there were 2 ships there, one's gone. I can check that the vexor is actually there by even bringing this down. Okay, what is this? 3.09. So if I change this, I'm going to type in a value of 3.08, and when I hit scan now, 3.0, hit scan, you'll see the vexor has disappeared off. My scan cone falls just short. Let's change it back up to 3.1, scan again, and I can see that the vexor is still there. I can see that he's ratting because now there's a wreck. You see how this awesome tool starts to develop your situational awareness of what's going on around you. Alright, that's our D-scan. It's really a really short introduction. We'll do more on this in future videos, but let's close that up for now. It's an incredible tool. I'm going to set it right back to 360 degrees. Okay, so I've warped back to a spot that's now 8,000 kilometers off the Dodixie Trade Hub station, and we'll quickly talk now about the overview. I'm going to tidy up my my sort of UI here a little bit. I'm just going to make a bit of space. I'm going to put my D-scan up in here. I think this might be another video, just setting up your UI in a way that's functional for you. Alright, let's talk about the grid and the overview, because we've gone from the solar system, local chat, down to D-scan, 14.3 AU. Next on our list was this 8,000 kilometer sphere, which is our overview, or the grid. And you'll see on the right hand side here, your overview. Now, like I said, this could be a whole 1 hour video just on the overview. For the moment, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so we can see some more information. Just like the D-scanner window, you can drag your columns out, you can sort by name type. Usually you'll want to sort by distance, closest to you out to furthest from you. So you'll see all of these items I can see are on the grid with me. They're all within 8,000, roughly 8,000 kilometers. The ships. Things outside of that also show up, things like gates, stations. But if we're looking at ships, which from a defensive situational awareness point of view is the main bit of info we're after. So I can see this is kind of clogged up with things. So look, a couple of tips. If you quickly want to remove something from your overview, like these mobile depots, in fact, if you don't know what they are, you can hover over the icon and it will tell you what it is. These are mobile depots. This is a Corvette. This is a strategic cruiser. Obviously, as you start to learn these ship types, you'll know, but the little icons can give you some idea as you're learning. So I don't want all these mobile depots on here clogging up my overview. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to remove mobile depot from overview. See how that tidied that up instantly. So my overview will show me names. Now in this case we're talking about the actual pilot's name, not the name of the ship like the D-scan was giving us. So I can see Kebab Monster here is in his capsule. He's 8,000 kilometers from me. He's doing a velocity of 233 meters per second. So once again, I couldn't see that originally, but by dragging it out, I've got a velocity here. Now you can add all kinds of information to your overview. For the moment, as an introduction, we're just going to leave it with name, type, and velocity and distance. You can add up to 8 different tabs, which will give you can set them up for different types of information. For the moment, we're just going to leave it on general as we just get introduced to our grid. You'll remember that I said you can't warp to ships that are on your overview. If I tried to warp to this venture, if I go with my radial menu, you'll see the warp option is grayed out. I do have an approach option. I can approach that venture, but I cannot warp to it. The station, however, is a different story. If I wanted to, I can actually warp to the station. So you cannot warp to ships that are on your overview. You can only warp to something that is more than 150 kilometers from your current location. Right, let's do one last thing with our overview. Like I said, we'll do a whole new video on that at some point. But for now, I want to show you how you can quickly connect your overview and your D-scanner. So we're on our general default tab. We're going to go to this little triple sort of icon here, and we're going to open overview settings. Now we're going to create a new overview window that only shows us ships. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to deselect everything, okay? Because in this window, we've got categories that we can select on and off for our overview. I've deselected everything, so you see the overview has gone clear. I am going to go to the ships category. I'm going to right click on that and select all. You'll see now my overview shows all the types of ships, all 46 different ships, and you'll see now on my overview the only thing on here are ships. I am going to save this and I'm going to call it ships and hit OK. Do I want to override this? Yeah. If you've already got one with that name, which I did, you can certainly override it. Now, my general tab here is now only showing ships. So let's put that back to normal, the normal default one. So if I right click, I'm going to load default to tab. I'm going to load the general default and it's back where it was. But I've got in the memory now saved a overview that only shows ships. So let's add it. I'm going to go click the plus icon here and I'm going to put in a new tab. I'm going to call this ships, hit OK, and on here I'm going to right click and I'm going to load a preset to tab, and you'll see the preset that we just saved shows up there. It's called ships. So now when I click on this tab, I only see the ships. I can now jump quickly between my general and my ships. You'll also notice all those mobile depots are back, because when we removed them, it was only temporary unless we saved it. Right, how does this connect to our D-scanner? Well, when we're D-scanning, we really often, you only want to see if there are ships nearby. So we can now go up to our D-scanner and we can go to the filtered options and select some different filters for our D-scanner. This one is kind of the default active overview, so it will show whatever is the current overview that you're using. So if we were just using this ships one, we can hit scan and the only thing that'll show up on here now is the ships. If I was in my general tab and I hit scan, you'll see we've got wrecks and all kinds of things. It's a long list of gunk. However, that's a bit awkward if you want to be using your general overview but just descanning for ships. So I'm going to leave my overview on general and I'm going to filter my directional scanner, and you'll see down here if I scroll down I've got a option because I just created this overview tab called ships. So if I click ships now, I can actually operate my overview as normal. I can see everything around me, so I can warp to stations, planets, etc. But my D-scan, when I hit my spacebar, is only showing ships because I filtered it. So it's kind of operating independently. I'm D-scanning for ships, but my overview is showing whatever overview tab I'm wanting to use. However, my D-scan is now just simply showing ships. A really handy tip to avoid having too much gunk from the overview show up in your D-scanner. Alright, there's a lot there. Let's move on now to our last item, our tactical overlay. One last thing before we move on actually is our camera, our orbital camera. If I want to have a look at this station here, Dixie, I could, it's 8,000 kilometers away. I should be able to see that in space. I could scan around till, there it is. I can see what's going on over there. So my drone cameras are now pointing at the station. There's a much better way though. I can go down to this little icon here. If I right click this, in fact if I hover over it, it should give me some information. I can toggle auto tracking. So Shift C, and you'll see it's gone now to a square little box around it. So that means now anytime I press something on my overview, my camera will look at that. So if I want to look over at this gate, let's look at something over here, right? If it's on the overview, I can click on it and my view will now go exactly to that item. So that really helps in terms of situational awareness and knowing where I'm sitting in relation to something or what direction things are from me. And you can do that with ships as well. Let's put, so if I want to look at this Nestor, right, etc., etc. So anytime I click on it, because I've set it to auto tracking, you can also do it via right click and toggle auto tracking. Okay, so now when I click, my cameras won't move. Let's put it back on because I think it's pretty handy. Lastly, but certainly not least, is our tactical overlay. So in space, if I zoom out, I'm just a dot here in a big open bit of space. This doesn't really give me much information at all about where things are in relation to me. I'm going to turn on my tactical overlay with this little button, and you'll see now I've got this concentric circle overlay that centers on my ship, and as I zoom out I'll see circles indicating kilometers from my ship. 5 kilometer ring, 10 kilometer ring. There's a fair bit of info you can get on here. This red dotted line indicates my target range. And also, if I was to hover over a module, you'll see it gives me this shaded red section that shows the range of the module. So if it's weapons, in this case my Miner 1 has an optimal range of 10 kilometers, and you'll see that correlates with the 10 kilometer circle ring. You may notice that one of these the 4 directional north, south, east and west lines actually is a different color. That is actually space north. It's just a little visual indicator of which way is space north. Not entirely practical, maybe perhaps in a fleet situation where you want everyone to go in the one direction, say everyone head north, or it's 2 hour east, but it does give you an idea of a space north. And so for example, if I wanted to go that way, I can on my tactical overlay, I could just sort of lay it down flat and click off in that direction. If I double click in space, my ship will now head sort of in that northerly direction, and that'll indicate by this little blue line that goes on forever that says, well, that's where I'll be heading, along that direction. I've got a little vector arrow that shows my ship is heading in that direction, and it's an indicator of the speed. So in fact, if I slowed my ship now down to half speed by clicking once in here, you'll see that little blue arrow will come in to indicate a reduction in speed. In fact, if I hit Control Space, it should disappear altogether, including my direction line, because I'm not going anywhere now, so there's no direction. But what if I didn't want to travel forever? What if I just wanted to go to this spot here, 30 kilometers in this direction from where I am at? Well, this is where you can use your Q control. If I hold down the Q button and drag my mouse in and out from my spot, I'm getting a range distance from my ship, and I'm going to go out in this direction 30 kilometers while I'm holding down Q, double click, and you'll see that as my direction line now stops, it has a circle at the end of it. It doesn't go on forever, and my ship will only go to that point then stop. But what about if you wanted to go up or down from the plane? Well, your Q control also allows you to do that. Let's say I wanted to move 5 kilometers sort of down the screen and then maybe up 45 degrees. So I'm going to hold down my Q control, I'm going to come out my distance, in this case 5, click once, and then I can move my mouse up and down to send my vector direction below the plane or above the plane. It can be a little bit hit and miss, it can be a bit awkward, certainly come with practice, but you'll see now I'm moving 5 kilometers out and up approximately 45 degrees, and my ship will go to that point and then stop. So it's such a handy tool. I can be zoomed right into my ship and just looking at things and double clicking in space to go in that direction, or I can zoom right out and get a really clear picture of everything that's going on in this 200 kilometer space around me. So I'm going to warp to within 10 kilometers of the station, and you can see my tactical overlay now shows me a nice 3D representation of what's going on in space around me. Where the station is relative to me, some of the ships undocking from the station, some nasty people have dropped a whole heap of these disgusting mobile depots, which have all gone into reinforced mode, so that's kind of clogging up the beauty of the area, but hey, you get that in busy places. And finally, if you think, man, that sort of clogs up my view of space a bit, you can simply turn it off. If you want to be looking at the views, you don't have to have it on all the time, but whenever you're wanting to sort of maneuver around in space, it's really a great tool to have on you. That's it, guys. Wow, we've covered a lot. We covered local chat, we covered D-scan, we covered the overview and the grid, and finally our tactical overlay. 4 great tools for giving you some situational awareness in space. Next time we're together, we'll put them all together and see how we actually use them in a low-sec mining scenario to stay alive. All right, good job. Well done.